For the last decade, billionaires and Silicon Valley CEOs have been trying to hack the modern workday. They bought standing desks, they bought treadmill desks, they built weird, ergonomic kneeling chairs. But a groundbreaking, rigorously controlled clinical trial from Kent State University suggests they might all be doing it wrong. Scientists have uncovered that the secret to fighting the global epidemic of chronic disease isn't standing up. It's a tiny, almost invisible behavioral tweak that you can do right now, sitting exactly where you are. Welcome back to Clinical Trials Explained, the only channel where we take the world's most cutting-edge medical research, strip away the boring academic jargon, and tell you exactly how it's going to change your everyday life. We are talking about sedentary behavior, or as the media likes to call it, the sitting disease. We are going to look at an ingenious study out of Kent State University that asked a very simple, almost ridiculous question. Can pedaling a tiny miniature bicycle under your desk actually trick your body into thinking it's running a marathon throughout the week? Can it change your brain chemistry? Can it melt away body weight while you sit on endless Zoom calls? By the end of this video, you are going to understand the biological mechanics of what sitting actually does to your blood. You're going to understand how this brilliant trial was designed to eliminate human bias, and most importantly, you are going to find out if you need to buy one of these devices for yourself before your next workday begins. But to understand why this trial is so revolutionary, we first have to travel inside your body and look at the terrifying reality of what happens when you simply stop moving. Let's paint a picture. I want you to imagine a typical office worker. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah wakes up, she sits at the kitchen table to eat breakfast, she sits in her car to commute to work. She sits at her desk from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. She sits in her car to drive home, and then, exhausted from a long day of mental stress, she sits on the couch to watch Netflix. Sarah might even go to the gym for 45 minutes a day. She sweats, she lifts weights, she feels great. But here is the terrifying biological truth that scientists have only recently discovered. That 45-minute workout, it does not cancel out the 14 hours of sitting. You cannot out-exercise a sedentary lifestyle. It is a biological impossibility. Why? Because of how human beings evolved. I want you to think of your body like a high-performance sports car. When you are moving, even just a little bit, like walking around, foraging, or tending to a garden like our ancestors did, the engine of that sports car is purring. The oil is flowing, the battery is charging. But when you sit down in an office chair, you don't just put the car in park, you turn the engine completely off. Within just 90 seconds of sitting down, the muscular electrical activity in your legs completely shuts off. Literally, the electrical currents drop to zero. Your calorie burning rate immediately drops to about 1 single calorie per minute. It is the absolute bare minimum required to keep your heart beating and your lungs breathing. But it gets worse. After just 2 hours of sitting, your body's production of an enzyme called Lipoprotein Lipase plummets by up to 90%. Let me explain what Lipoprotein Lipase is, because it is the hero of our story. Imagine little microscopic Pac-Men swimming through your bloodstream. Their entire job is to gobble up fat molecules floating in your blood and burn them for energy. When you are standing or moving, these little Pac-Men are feasting. They keep your arteries clear, they keep your cholesterol in check. But when you sit, the Pac-Men go to sleep. The fat just stays in your blood. It clogs your arteries, it gets stored directly on your waistline. And after 4 hours of sitting, your body actually starts to become insulin resistant. Your cells stop responding to the sugar in your blood, which is the very first step on the terrifying road to type 2 diabetes. This is why the World Health Organization has linked excessive sitting to chronic diseases, heart failure, and severe weight gain. So what did we do to fix this? Over the last 10 years, the corporate world panicked. Human resources departments everywhere started buying standing desks. Oh, the standing desk, the magical cure to all our problems, right? Wrong. Recent massive biomechanical studies have shown that standing perfectly still for 8 hours is actually terrible for you too. Sure, you burn a few extra calories, but because gravity is a relentless force, the blood pools in your legs. It increases your risk for varicose veins, deep vein thrombosis, and severe lower back pain. We don't need to just stand. We need to move. We need a flowing river, not a stagnant pond. But you can't run on a treadmill and type a complex spreadsheet at the same time. Your head bobs up and down, you get sweaty, you smell terrible in the afternoon meeting. This is the exact dilemma that Professor Melissa Zullo, an epidemiology expert at Kent State University, wanted to solve. And she found a potential answer in a peculiar little device known as the DeskCycle. Let me explain the mechanism of action here. How does a DeskCycle actually work? A DeskCycle is exactly what it sounds like. It's the bottom half of an exercise bike. Just the pedals and a magnetic resistance wheel, designed to be so low to the ground that it fits entirely under a standard office desk. The mechanism of action relies on a biological concept called N.E.A.T. N.E.A.T stands for Non-Exercise Activity Thermogenesis. It sounds like a complicated word from a sci-fi movie, but I promise you it's a concept a fifth grader could understand. N.E.A.T is simply all the energy you burn doing things that are not sleeping, eating, or explicitly working out. Fidgeting your leg, that's N.E.A.T. Walking to the water cooler, that's N.E.A.T. Shivering in the cold, that's N.E.A.T. Scientists have realized that naturally thin people, the ones who seem to eat whatever they want and never gain weight, often have incredibly high levels of N.E.A.T. They are constantly moving their bodies in tiny, almost imperceptible ways. The DeskCycle is designed to artificially inject N.E.A.T directly into your workday. By pedaling at a very low resistance while you type, you aren't trying to sweat. You aren't trying to get your heart rate up to 150 beats per minute. You are simply keeping the engine idling. You are keeping the lipoprotein lipase Pac-Man wake. You are keeping the blood flowing out of your calves and back to your heart. But in the world of science, a good idea isn't enough. You need proof. You need data. You need a rigorous clinical trial. And that is exactly what this trial is. Let's break down the genius of this study protocol. In September of 2017, the researchers at Kent State University gathered 80 participants, but they didn't just pick anybody. They had incredibly strict criteria to make sure the data was pure. First, they only selected adult women. Why? Because in metabolic and behavioral studies, men and women can sometimes have vastly different physiological responses to low-grade exercise. By limiting the study to one sex, the researchers eliminated a massive biological variable. Second, the participants had to be full-time administrative employees at the university who were officially classified as sedentary for at least 75% of their workday. They needed the ultimate desk jockeys, the people chained to their keyboards. Third, they had a bizarre physical requirement. You had to be under 5 foot 10 inches tall, and your desk had to be at least 27 inches high. Think about that for a second. Why would a clinical trial care exactly how tall you are? Because of the knees. If you are 6 feet tall and try to pedal a bike under a standard desk, you are going to violently smash your kneecaps into the underside of the table every single rotation. It's a hilarious mental image, but in a scientific trial, if your participants are bruising their knees, they are going to stop pedaling. The researchers needed to guarantee that the physical environment allowed for seamless, uninterrupted movement. Finally, they excluded anyone with uncontrolled cardiovascular disease or joint pain. They needed a clean slate. Now, how did they test this? This is where the trial design becomes a masterpiece. They used what is called a randomized crossover design. If you are a nerd for clinical trial mechanics like I am, you are going to love this. Usually in a medical trial, you have 2 groups. Group A gets the drug, Group B gets a sugar pill. They go their separate ways, and you compare them at the end. That's called a parallel design. But parallel designs have a flaw. What if Group A just happens to have better genetics? What if Group A naturally has faster metabolisms? It skews the results. A crossover design fixes this by making every single person their own control group. Here is how it worked. The 80 women were split into 2 groups. In Phase 1, Group A was given the desk cycles. For 8 solid weeks, every Monday through Friday, they pedaled while they worked. Group B was the control group. They just did their normal, soul-crushing, sedentary routine. Then, at the end of 8 weeks, they crossed over. They literally switched places. Group A gave their bikes to Group B. Now for the next 8 weeks, Group B became the pedaling experimental group, and Group A went back to sitting perfectly still. This design is brilliant because it allows the scientists to see exactly how the same human body reacts to the intervention versus the control. There is nowhere for bad data to hide. So what exactly were they measuring? What were the primary outcomes they cared about? Of course, they measured the raw minutes of exercise. They wanted to see if the women actually used the bikes. Did it increase their mean minutes of light to moderate physical activity? But the secondary measures are where this trial becomes truly fascinating. They measured feasibility. This is a huge word in occupational health. Feasibility simply means, is this actually realistic in the real world? Sure, pedaling under a desk sounds great on paper, but what if it makes your shoulders bounce so much you can't type an email? What if the low hum of the magnetic wheel drives your cubicle neighbor insane? What if you sweat through your blouse right before a major presentation to the dean of the university? If a health intervention is perfectly healthy, but completely annoying, human beings will abandon it in 3 days. The trial rigorously tracked if the DeskCycle was truly feasible for modern work. Next, they tracked weight change, the holy grail. Could a zero sweat, zero distraction activity actually trigger passive weight reduction over a 16-week period? Remember the N.E.A.T principle we talked about? Burning just 100 extra calories a day without realizing it equates to 10 pounds of pure fat loss over a single year. And finally, they tracked mood. This might be the most important metric of the entire trial. How was mood impacted during the workday? We often forget that the brain is just another organ connected to the body's plumbing system. When you sit still for 8 hours, blood flow to the brain literally slows down. Oxygen delivery decreases. But more importantly, prolonged sitting suppresses the release of a miracle protein in your brain called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Think of BDNF as Miracle-Gro for your brain cells. It protects your neurons, it fights off stress, it literally prevents depression. When you stop moving, your BDNF levels crash, leading to that 3 p.m. brain fog, the extreme irritability, and the existential dread you feel staring at a spreadsheet. The researchers hypothesized that the gentle, continuous pedaling motion would keep the heart rate elevated just enough to pump oxygen-rich blood into the prefrontal cortex, stimulating BDNF, releasing mild endorphins, and fundamentally changing the psychological experience of being at work. They weren't just trying to cure the sitting disease. They were trying to cure the Tuesday afternoon blues. Now, let's talk about the results. Because this trial was completely finalized and its status verified as completed, the data is sitting in the hands of the researchers. While the raw, peer-reviewed numbers have not been fully blast published across public databases just yet, the implications of this exact trial structure are sending shockwaves through the fields of ergonomics and preventive medicine. Let's look at the immense what-ifs that this data represents. What if the feasibility scores came back at 95%? What if the data proves that typing speed, reading comprehension, and phone etiquette are completely unaffected by pedaling at 15 miles per hour under a desk? If that is true, every single excuse a corporation has for not providing movement options completely evaporates. What if the mood tracking data shows a 30% reduction in workplace anxiety? Imagine the financial implications of that. Corporations lose billions of dollars every single year to employee burnout, sick days, and low productivity caused by depression. If a $1,500 plastic bike can act as a mechanical antidepressant simply by keeping blood flowing to the brain, it changes the entire calculus of corporate wellness. And what about the weight? In similar physiological N.E.A.T studies, continuous light movement has been shown to burn an additional 300 to 500 calories over an 8-hour shift. Let me put that into perspective for you. 500 calories a day is 2,500 calories a work week. Over a month, that is 10,000 extra calories burned. That is the equivalent of running 3 full marathons a month in pure caloric expenditure, while sitting in a chair wearing business casual clothing. This study, out of Kent State, is not just about a quirky office gadget. It is a profound look at how we have designed a society that is fundamentally incompatible with our biology. We took apex predators, human beings built to walk 20 miles a day, climb trees, and hunt, and we put them in padded chairs under fluorescent lights, forced them to stare at glowing rectangles, and then wondered why everyone is sick, tired, and overweight. For decades, the medical community's answer was to shame us. They told us we needed to wake up at 5 a.m. and go to a CrossFit class. They told us it was our fault for being lazy. But this trial suggests a completely different paradigm. It suggests that health doesn't have to be a brutal, sweaty punishment that happens outside of your daily life. Health can be integrated into the very fabric of your day. If interventions like the DeskCycle are proven to reduce chronic disease and trigger weight loss, we could see a future where health insurance companies literally mail these devices to your house for free. We could see a future where doctors don't prescribe you another blood pressure pill, but instead prescribe you pedal time. We could finally stop fighting our biology and start working with it. You don't need to quit your desk job to save your life. You might just need to keep your legs moving. Trials like this are happening every single day, quietly shaping the future of medicine, technology, and your personal health. But the media won't talk about them until it's old news. That's why this channel exists. If you found this deep dive fascinating, if it made you rethink your office setup, or if you are literally looking on Amazon right now for an under-desk bike, do me a massive favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. It tells the YouTube algorithm that you want real, scientific truth, not just internet noise. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment down below right now. Would you actually use one of these under your desk, or do you think it would drive you completely crazy? Let's debate it in the comments. In our next video, we are looking at a bizarre clinical trial, testing whether a common household spice can literally reverse biological aging. You will not want to miss it. Until then, stay curious, keep moving, and I'll see you in the next one.